1 minute ago, across global media, the world stopped tonight. Within hours, every major network, every diplomatic channel, every intelligence office in Europe was on high alert because Vladimir Putin, the one man the West fears to provoke, had just issued a chilling public warning directly aimed at Prime Minister Starmer. It started quietly. A new sanctions bill was rushed through Parliament under the cover of national security. The plan, according to Downing Street sources, was to target the hidden fortunes of Russian oligarchs operating in London's shadow economy, money linked to oil, arms, and state-backed media networks. But this time, Starmer went further. Reports suggest the sanctions touched a nerve, freezing assets tied directly to figures within the Kremlin itself. And that's when everything changed. At exactly 6:42 p.m. Moscow time, the Kremlin released a statement, cold, direct, and unmistakably personal. Putin himself, not his foreign minister, not a spokesman, but the Russian president, accused Starmer of economic warfare and promised severe, unpredictable consequences. The world had heard those words before, and every time they were followed by something that shook Europe to its core. Within minutes, British intelligence agencies went into lockdown. The Foreign Office summoned emergency advisors. The Prime Minister's motorcade was reportedly diverted from Downing Street to a secure underground facility. Sources inside Whitehall described the atmosphere as tense, like the moments before a storm hits. Social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Putin warning and hashtag UK in crisis surged across platforms. The BBC interrupted scheduled programming. Sky News aired breaking red banners reading simply, "Threat from Moscow." And as the nation watched in disbelief, reports surfaced that Russian cyber units had begun probing critical British infrastructure, power grids, air traffic systems, and even financial data networks. Nothing was confirmed officially, but the pattern was too precise to ignore. For Starmer, it was supposed to be a show of strength, a statement that Britain would never bow to foreign influence. But now it looked like the gamble had triggered something far darker. In the corridors of Parliament, panic whispered behind closed doors. Several MPs reportedly called the move reckless, accusing Starmer of trying to play Churchill while standing on quicksand. Meanwhile, the opposition demanded immediate clarification. Who authorised these sanctions and what intelligence supported them? One senior Tory figure told journalists off the record, "You don't poke the bear unless you've got an army behind you." But perhaps the most chilling reaction came not from Moscow, but from the palace. Sources claim King Charles was briefed just after midnight. His response, described by aides as grave, was to request an urgent meeting with the Prime Minister. Royal protocol rarely intervenes in foreign policy, but when the security of the realm is threatened, the King has both the duty and the right to be informed. The stakes couldn't be higher. Britain was already stretched thin. Energy markets volatile, public trust in leadership at historic lows, and NATO alliances fractured by internal disputes. Now the spectre of direct confrontation with Russia loomed over everything, and beneath the headlines, deeper fears were stirring. Could this be the spark that exposes just how fragile Britain's power really is? In Moscow, state television celebrated. Broadcasters showed images of London under grey skies, calling Britain a fading empire run by frightened lawyers. Putin's allies declared the sanctions a declaration of hostility. The tone was mocking, confident, almost amused. But behind that theatre lay a message Britain could not ignore. Russia believed the UK had overplayed its hand. Inside number 10, aides say Starmer remained defiant. He believed the moral fight against corruption and aggression must continue, no matter the cost. But insiders whispered a different story, that divisions inside the cabinet were widening fast. Some ministers feared retaliation could hit within days. Energy routes, cyber defence, even covert interference in British media were all potential pressure points. And yet Starmer's team insisted this was a stand for democracy, that if Britain backed down now, it would signal weakness to every authoritarian state watching. But what if defiance turned to disaster? Because tonight, the intelligence briefings were clear. Moscow's warning wasn't rhetorical, it was a line in the sand. And if that line was crossed again, Retaliation wouldn't come in speeches or headlines. It would come in silence, in the sudden blackout of data, in the flicker of power stations, in the tremor of markets collapsing overnight. For decades, Britain prided itself on resilience, the blitz spirit, the calm under fire. But in the digital age, the enemy doesn't bomb cities, it erases systems. The question now echoing through Whitehall, through every defence briefing and late-night call, was this: had Starmer just started a war he couldn't see? Because one truth remains, every time Britain believes it has taken control of history, history reminds it who really holds the power. And tonight, as Putin's words echoed across Europe and the Prime Minister faced the fallout of his boldest decision yet, one thing was certain: the world was watching, and Britain stood on the edge of something it could not easily undo. What began as a diplomatic standoff overnight had now spiralled into a full-blown national emergency. The Foreign Secretary's car was seen speeding through the gates of Downing Street before dawn. Journalists lined Whitehall, their cameras catching ministers rushing into closed-door crisis meetings. Something had shifted, and it was bigger than anyone expected. Reports emerged that Russian-linked accounts had begun liquidating assets in London. Billions of pounds vanished from UK markets in less than an hour. The pound fell sharply against the dollar. In the city, traders described it as a controlled panic, the kind that whispers before a crash. Yet the real fear wasn't economic, it was psychological. Britain suddenly realised how exposed it truly was. At 9:10 a.m, Putin appeared again, this time during a live televised meeting with his defence chiefs. His tone was calm, deliberate, surgical. He called Britain a hostile actor and hinted that unfriendly states would face consequences in ways they do not yet understand. It wasn't a threat in the traditional sense, but it was a promise wrapped in quiet menace. Inside Downing Street, aides scrambled to contain the fallout. Keir Starmer faced his war cabinet. Voice tight, eyes drawn. Intelligence briefings suggested that Russian cyber units had already penetrated several non-military government servers. The message was clear: Moscow could reach inside Britain's digital core anytime it wanted. And yet Starmer refused to step back. He insisted the sanctions were a moral stand against corruption and tyranny. But the cracks inside his government were widening. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, reportedly warned that the sanctions were crippling investor confidence. "We've opened a front we can't afford," she said in a private meeting later leaked to the press. Defence officials argued that retaliation was inevitable. Some even muttered that Starmer was dragging Britain into a shadow war, and still he pressed on. The media turned rabid. Headlines screamed across the tabloids: Putin's vengeance, is Britain next? Cyber shadows over London, markets in freefall. News anchors speculated live about potential Russian interference in British elections, energy supplies, even hospitals. Conspiracy and reality blurred into the same anxious fog. By midday, social media was chaos. Thousands gathered outside Parliament demanding answers. Protesters waved signs reading, "We didn't vote for war." Others shouted for stronger action, calling Starmer a hero for standing up to Putin's intimidation. The country was splitting in two, half terrified, half defiant, and both sides growing louder by the hour. In Buckingham Palace, the King convened his private council. He listened in silence as intelligence officers outlined worst-case scenarios: cyber sabotage, economic collapse, and the possibility of targeted disinformation campaigns. According to one aide, Charles stared out the window for nearly a minute before whispering, "We've walked into a storm with no compass." Meanwhile, NATO allies hesitated. The US issued a statement of support, but behind the scenes, Washington urged caution. Germany called for de-escalation, France offered mediation, but Britain stood isolated, its Prime Minister surrounded by critics, its allies distant, its adversaries circling. Then came the second strike, an invisible, instantaneous, devastating. Just after 3 p.m, several major British banks reported simultaneous network outages. Transactions froze. ATMs went offline. Within minutes, panic spread through the public. Was it a glitch or retaliation? No official confirmation came, only silence. The Home Office ordered emergency security reviews while the Treasury issued reassurances that systems were being restored. But the timing was too precise to ignore. That evening in Parliament, the opposition demanded answers. Tory MPs accused Starmer of using Moscow for political theatre. Nigel Farage appeared on live television declaring, "This man is gambling with our sovereignty for headlines." The clip went viral. But Starmer held firm in a nationally televised address. Standing at the podium, voice steady despite the pressure, he declared, "Britain will not be bullied. We will not trade our principles for fear." For a brief moment, even his critics went silent. It was defiance or desperation, depending on who you asked. Still, behind that calm delivery, chaos brewed. MI6 briefings warned that Russia was preparing a hybrid retaliation, meaning not open war but something darker. Sabotage disguised as coincidence, power cuts, misinformation, economic shocks, small tremors before the earthquake. And in Moscow, according to intercepted chatter, Kremlin insiders were laughing. They called Britain a lion that forgot its claws. As night fell again, the lights of London flickered. A momentary pulse, nothing more. But for millions watching, it felt like an omen. The government denied any connection, calling it a minor grid issue. Yet on encrypted forums, Russian-affiliated accounts posted one message repeatedly: "This is only the beginning." By then, Britain knew the warning was real, and the next move would determine not just Starmer's fate, but the country's place in a world that no longer feared its power. The tension had seeped into everything: the news bulletins, the shop queues, the conversations whispered on buses and trains. Every flicker of light, every slow loading web page felt like an omen. The government still denied any Russian retaliation, but the silence between official words said more than any press release ever could. Inside Number 10, the Prime Minister's crisis team had turned into a siege operation. Phones rang without pause. Intelligence reports arrived every hour, each one painting a darker picture. Failed cyber defences, data leaks from sensitive agencies, suspicious movements of foreign money through London's back channels. It wasn't just a political standoff anymore. It was a slow bleed of control. At 6 a.m, an encrypted communication reached Whitehall, a direct message from Moscow relayed through diplomatic intermediaries. The Kremlin wanted one thing: a reversal of sanctions and a public apology. The threat beneath the words was unmistakable. If Britain refused, Moscow warned, unseen consequences would unfold within 72 hours. As Starmer refused, he told his aides, "We can't bow to a dictator. If we give in once, we'll never stand again." Those words would soon become the most repeated and most controversial line of his career. By noon, the markets had collapsed. The FTSE plunged. The Bank of England scrambled to stabilise the currency. Supermarkets reported digital outages. For the first time in decades, the nation's infrastructure looked fragile, too digital, too centralised, too easy to shake. The palace intervened. King Charles called an emergency session of the Privy Council, the first of its kind since the Cold War. Senior ministers, intelligence chiefs and military officials attended in silence. The king, calm but visibly shaken, asked a single question that froze the room. "Are we certain this is still under our control?" No one answered. Meanwhile, reports leaked that Russian operatives had been spotted in European capitals, allegedly coordinating economic disruption operations. Whether true or not, it no longer mattered. Panic had taken on a life of its own.